We always talk about the things we can see, like the really clever strategies or the newest technologies that drive success. But what if the real secret sauce, the thing that is both incredibly powerful and really rare, isn't something we can see at all?
I think you're right. You're getting at something really foundational, something
Yeah,
that either makes all those other things work better or completely undermines them. It's that invisible structure of how people work together.
exactly. And in this deep dive, we're going deep into the heart of that. We're looking at the key principles of teamwork, and we're using Patrick Lencioni's book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, as our guide.
It's important for our listeners to know that Lencioni uses a really interesting story, a leadership fable, to explain these concepts. So we're going to be pulling out these amazing insights through a narrative that's very easy to relate to.
Basically, think of this as your fast track to understanding what makes a team work well or fall apart. And this applies whether you're leading a team, working on a project with other people, or just dealing with group dynamics in any situation.
The story takes place at Decision Tech. It's a Silicon Valley startup that looked like it would be a sure success. Experienced leaders, a great business plan, and tons of funding.
Yeah, at the beginning, it was all excitement and high hopes. But then things started to go wrong. Missed deadlines became normal, important people started quitting, and the initial energy just disappeared.
And this had a real impact. After only 2 years, the board asked the CEO, Jeff Shanley, to step down. And this was despite the fact that the company still had a good shot at an IPO.
And here's the thing, none of the 150 employees were surprised. That tells you a lot about what the environment was like inside the company. Lots of office politics among the executives, no shared goals, and progress that felt super slow.
This raises a really important question for you to think about. How can a company with so much potential fail like this? The board clearly saw a deep problem, noticing the toxic and unproductive environment. They realized they needed a change in leadership.
Right. And that's when Catherine Peterson steps in as the new CEO. But her background is not what you'd typically expect in Silicon Valley. She had experience in the military, raising kids, and she was involved in competitive sports.
What's fascinating here is how much the board believed in Catherine. The chairman even had a personal connection to her. Her husband had coached his son, so this wasn't just a normal hiring process. They really trusted her to fix things.
And Catherine's first moves were, well, let's just say they were different. Right away, she scheduled an off-site retreat for her executive team. These were busy people dealing with big company problems, so the idea of going away for team-building exercises didn't really excite them. They felt they had real work to do.
This immediately shows us a common tension in organizations, the perceived conflict between addressing urgent tasks and making time for the team's well-being. Catherine clearly saw the team's health as crucial for their long-term success.
Totally agree. Yeah. So let's meet these executives that Catherine is leading. First, there's Jeff, the former CEO who's now in charge of business development. Apparently, he's great at networking and getting funding, but not so good at managing. His meetings were super structured agendas, minutes, the whole 9 yards, but they rarely achieved anything. Interestingly, he seemed kind of relieved to step down.
That reaction is very telling. It suggests maybe he wasn't really cut out for the top leadership role, or maybe he just didn't want it. Perhaps he realized his talents were better used somewhere else.
Then there's Mikey, the VP of marketing. She's really outspoken, constantly comparing Decision Tech to her old jobs in a negative way, and she was the queen of the eye roll whenever someone questioned her ideas. Not exactly a team player.
Right. Her behavior makes you wonder if she's really invested in the company culture or willing to collaborate.
Next, we have Martin, the chief technology officer. He's brilliant, a true tech whiz. But in team meetings, always on his laptop, hardly ever participating unless someone got a technical fact wrong, and then he'd jump in with a sarcastic correction. This really annoyed the rest of the team. They saw him as this genius who was off in his own world.
This is a really important takeaway. Just because someone is brilliant individually, it doesn't mean they'll be successful on a team. Martin not being involved probably made it harder for the team to use his knowledge and created some resentment among them.
We also have JR, the head of sales. He's experienced, good with people, and a little older than the others. The problem with JR, he's not reliable. He'd agree to do things, but often wouldn't follow through. But because he'd always hit his sales targets before coming to Decision Tech, he was given a lot of leeway.
This shows a common challenge. How do you deal with someone who's not performing well now, but who has a history of success? It emphasizes the need for consistent standards and accountability, no matter what someone's past achievements are.
Then there's Carlos in customer support. He's quiet, dependable, a hard worker, and very trustworthy. His role wasn't super clear, but he seemed like one of the few people on the team who was consistent and reliable.
It's often these quiet, dependable people who hold a team together. The fact that his role was undefined might suggest that the organization as a whole wasn't good at recognizing and using everyone's talents.
And finally, we have Nick, the VP of Product Development, who's very opinionated and always speaks his mind, and Jan, the VP of Operations, who's all about details and efficiency. Quite a mix of personalities, right?
Definitely. It's a group of people with different strengths and weaknesses. The big challenge for Catherine is turning them into a cohesive and high-performing team.
So Catherine's the new leader. She has this team, and they're all going to Napa for this retreat. But before they even get there, we see the first sign of trouble in an email from Martin.
Pay close attention to this email. It's short, to the point, and it brings up a potential conflict. There's a big customer opportunity with ASA Manufacturing, and it clashes with the planned offsite. Even this seemingly minor communication could make the tension worse on this already fragile team.
And Catherine doesn't just reply with a quick email back. She sees this as a crucial moment. She decides to talk to Martin directly, face-to-face. She sees it as her first real test as the CEO.
This direct, in-person approach signals a change in leadership. Catherine's showing that she's not going to avoid tough conversations and that she's committed to dealing with issues head-on.
She goes into Martin's office, and he's busy with emails, not even facing the door. She doesn't even knock.
Yeah.
Their conversation is pretty tense. He's immediately defensive about the offsite, saying their focus should be on closing deals.
Martin instantly focusing on sales above everything else might show a blind spot. He's probably seeing the offsite as a distraction from their main business goals, not as a necessary step to help them reach those goals.
Catherine stays calm but firm. She repeats that they need to function as a team before they can successfully go after sales. Then she offers to use her contacts to help reschedule the ASA meeting.
That's a smart move by Catherine. Not only does it address Martin's immediate concern, but it also subtly shows her authority and that she's willing to help the team in practical ways.
The next day, Catherine gets an unexpected invitation for lunch from Jeff, the former CEO. He's obviously uncomfortable, and he ends up saying the same things as Martin about the ASA meeting. He even suggests that Martin and JR just come to the offsite late.
It seems like Jeff, even though he's not in charge anymore, is still trying to influence things and maybe questioning Catherine's decisions. The fact that he's uncomfortable suggests he knows he's overstepping a bit.
Catherine's response is very measured. She acknowledges his perspective, but clearly states that she's committed to making the company run well. She's standing her ground.
She's finding that balance, respecting Jeff's past with the company, but also clearly establishing her own leadership style.
And then the chairman calls. Apparently, Jeff had talked to him. The chairman starts off friendly, but his tone changes when he hears about the clash with Martin.
This call from the chairman highlights how delicate the situation is. The board is definitely watching Catherine closely. His advice to build some relationships before you burn any bridges shows that he's worried about resistance to the changes she's making.
But even with the chairman, Catherine keeps her CEO composure. She's calm, direct, and says she's not going to sugarcoat things. She's not afraid of difficult conversations.
This firmness might seem assertive, but it also conveys how determined she is to fix the problems that have been hurting the company.
Fast forward to Napa. It's the first day of the offsite, and there's a lot of awkwardness and skepticism in the air. Catherine starts by addressing the team directly. She acknowledges their experience, their resources, their technology, but then immediately points out that they're not doing as well as their competitors.
She's bringing the conversation back to reality. By focusing on the actual results, she's setting the stage to talk about what's really stopping them from being successful.
Then she asks them directly, "Can anyone tell me why this is happening?" The room is silent. She goes on to say that she knows this offsite might seem silly and unbelievable.
That silence speaks volumes. Maybe it's a lack of awareness or an unwillingness to face the truth, or maybe even a sense of giving up. Catherine acknowledging their skepticism is a good way to connect with them a little.
Importantly, Catherine tells them up front that things are going to change and that some people might not fit into the new company. But she's clear that this isn't a threat, just a realistic possibility if they can't adapt. She also downplays the idea of doing touchy-feely exercises, emphasizing that they are there to achieve results.
This is a key moment where expectations are set. Catherine is making it very clear that the way things were is no longer acceptable, and the focus is going to be on performance. By downplaying the softer side of things, she's probably trying to appeal to the people on the team who are more results-driven.
And she states her fundamental belief. Results are the only true measure of a team. Clear and to the point, right?
Absolutely. It sets a very clear standard for success. It's about what the team achieves together, not about individual efforts.
Okay, now we get to the core of what Lencioni is talking about, the 5 dysfunctions. Catherine starts with what she sees as the most basic issue, a lack of trust.
And listeners, it's crucial to understand what Lencioni means by trust in this context. It's not just about believing that someone will do what they say. It's about feeling safe enough to be vulnerable with your team.
Right. It's about being able to admit your weaknesses, to ask for help without feeling stupid, and to share your honest thoughts without fear of being punished. Catherine even says it's probably the most important part of building a team that works well.
Think about teams where there's no trust. People hide their mistakes, they hesitate to ask for help, and they assume the worst about their colleagues' intentions. That creates a culture where everyone is defensive and nothing gets done efficiently. The key takeaway here is, a lack of trust acts like a drag on everything the team does.
Now compare that to a team where there is trust. People readily admit when they're wrong, they're happy to help each other, and they give each other the benefit of the doubt. That sounds like a much more productive and positive place to work, right?
Absolutely. When a team trusts each other, they communicate better, they collaborate more effectively, and they can focus their energy on solving problems instead of worrying about personal risks and hidden agendas.
So why does Catherine start building this trust? She has everyone share personal things about themselves, where they grew up, how many siblings they have, their hobbies, challenges they face as kids, and their first jobs. Not exactly groundbreaking stuff.
But look at the effect of these small personal disclosures. Carlos reveals he's the oldest of 9. Mikey shares that she used to study ballet. Jeff talks about being a bat boy for the Red Sox. Martin shares about his childhood in India. JR mentions his twin brother. Jan talks about her experience as a military brat. And Nick shares about playing against Catherine's husband's basketball team. All these little stories start to humanize them in each other's eyes. The important thing for you to remember is, building trust isn't about big, dramatic actions. It often starts with small acts of vulnerability that help colleagues see each other as people, not just titles or job roles.
It's amazing how these small revelations can bring people together. After just 45 minutes of this, the team reportedly feels closer and more relaxed than they had in the entire past year. But Catherine, being the experienced leader that she is, knows that this good feeling might not last. It'll be tested when they start dealing with real work issues.
So what does Catherine do next? She takes them deeper with personality assessments, like the Myers-Briggs type indicator. What's interesting is that even Martin, who seemed pretty detached before, gets involved with this.
Because let's be honest, most people love learning about themselves until it gets a little too real, right?
Yeah.
But Catherine is smart. She knows it's been a long day, so she schedules a break before they get too deep into it.
That shows she's aware of the team's energy and that these kinds of personal activities need to be paced.
During the break, everyone does their own thing, which maybe reflects their personalities and comfort levels. Martin goes back to his emails. The more outgoing people play a game of botchball. Catherine and Jan talk about budgets, while Mikey chooses to read by the pool, seemingly staying apart from the group.
These individual choices during the break can tell us a lot about the team dynamic, who's looking to connect and who's pulling away.
When they come back together after dinner, they continue discussing their work styles, which is good. It shows that the earlier sharing had some effect. But then Mikey throws a wrench in things.
Mikey's skepticism comes back when Nick says how accurate and helpful he found the personality descriptions. Her immediate eye roll shows how much she dislikes the exercise.
And Nick, good for him, calls her out on it. Mikey tries to brush it off, but Nick pushes back, pointing out her constant negativity. It's an uncomfortable moment, but probably a necessary one for the team.
This direct confrontation, even though it might feel awkward, is a critical step in addressing the lack of trust and open communication. It stops passive-aggressive behavior from undermining their progress.
Mikey then dismisses the whole thing as psychobabble. She argues that their competitors who are beating them don't waste time on this kind of stuff.
Mikey getting defensive and immediately turning the focus to their competitors could be a way of avoiding dealing with her own discomfort with vulnerability and self-reflection.
What's surprising is that Martin actually seems to agree with Mikey at first. But then he makes a sarcastic joke about their competitors probably being in Carmel, and it lightens the mood a bit with some dark humor.
Even though it's funny, Martin's sarcasm could also mean he's keeping his distance intellectually and avoiding dealing with the more personal aspects of team building.
Later, Catherine tries to talk to Mikey one-on-one, asking if she's all right. Mikey just says, "I'm fine," and sarcastically mentions that she won't be sharing any deep insights. Catherine decides not to push it for now.
Catherine trying to talk to Mikey shows she's aware of Mikey's resistance and is willing to work with her. But she also knows when to give someone space instead of forcing a confrontation.
But here's the thing. The next morning, Mikey actually seems more involved. Catherine quickly reminds everyone of their goals for the offsite, and the team keeps talking about their individual working styles. Then, Catherine does something important. She openly shares one of her own strengths, being able to cut through unnecessary information, and a weakness not always being a natural public speaker.
This is real leadership. By being vulnerable herself, Catherine makes it easier for others to do the same. It shows that even the CEO has areas where she can grow and improve.
And because Catherine shared, other executives start to share their strengths and weaknesses too. Jeff admits he's scared of failure. Carlos says he's good at follow-through but struggles to give progress updates. JR says he has strong customer relationships but is weak on follow-through. And even Martin admits his technical expertise can make him seem arrogant. This seems like a real breakthrough for most of them.
This open sharing of weaknesses is exactly how you start building the trust that Catherine is aiming for. It helps the team see each other as human with flaws. It builds empathy and understanding.
But it's important to note, Mikey still refuses to participate.
Mikey continuing to resist shows how deep her defensiveness runs and that she's not willing to fully engage in the team-building process. This is still a big hurdle for Catherine.
This leads Catherine to change gears and introduce the second dysfunction, but she doesn't actually name it yet. She tells a story about her husband, who is a successful high school basketball coach. He had a very talented player who was only focused on his own stats. So the coach makes a tough call and benches him for the good of the team.
This basketball analogy is a brilliant move. It really illustrates the importance of putting the team's success above individual ego. It also shows that a leader sometimes has to make hard choices that benefit the whole team.
And in the story, the player eventually changes his attitude and goes on to have a great college basketball career.
Yeah.
Catherine's point is clear. Her goal is to create the best team possible, not to help individual careers at the expense of the entire team.
This reinforces the focus on results and subtly challenges any team member who might be more concerned with their own achievements than with the success of decision tech as a whole.
Catherine then tries to steer the conversation towards defining clear team goals. She says their goals need to be so clear that individual egos become irrelevant. They start brainstorming potential metrics like profit, revenue growth, customer acquisition, product development timelines, and public relations activity.
This step is crucial for getting everyone on the same page. When they agree on shared, measurable goals, they can start moving away from individual agendas and towards a common purpose.
Right away, Martin dismisses these ideas as nothing new, and JR says his main concern is closing deals. This starts a debate, but they can't agree on anything.
This disagreement shows that they aren't really committed to a shared definition of success. Each person is still stuck in their own department, looking at results through their own narrow perspective.
This lack of agreement leads Catherine to a key realization. The problem isn't just disagreeing on metrics, but a deeper lack of commitment to shared results. Jeff then explains that in the past, they focused on individual accountability within their own departments, not on overall team goals.
Jeff's insight is really important. It identifies a systemic issue in their old way of doing things, a structure that unintentionally encouraged individual silos instead of collective ownership of company goals.
Catherine brings up the sports analogy again, saying that a basketball team focuses on winning games, not on individual players' stats or roles. Carlos then makes a really insightful observation. He feels like the team has been acting more like separate departments fighting for resources instead of working together toward common goals.
Carlos's observation is spot on. It shows the underlying dynamic of competition and self-interest that has been preventing them from working as a team.
JR, getting impatient, finally asks what the other dysfunctions are. So Catherine introduces the second dysfunction, fear of conflict. But she's not talking about avoiding disagreement altogether. She's talking about being unwilling to have passionate and honest debates about important issues.
She's making a crucial distinction. Healthy conflict, the kind she's advocating for, is about having open discussions, not personal attacks. It's how you bring different perspectives to the table and end up with better decisions.
She describes healthy conflict as passionate, unfiltered debate that leads to understanding and resolution. She notices that their team seems to lack this kind of productive arguing. They hold their frustrations in instead of talking them out.
When you don't have healthy conflict, you get this fake harmony. Real issues aren't addressed, and resentment builds up under the surface. That often leads to bad decisions and a lack of genuine buy-in.
Next, Catherine introduces the third dysfunction, lack of commitment. She explains that this often happens when they fail to make clear decisions and get everyone on board during those tough conversations. If people don't feel like they were heard, they're less likely to commit to the final decision.
Commitment isn't about everyone agreeing completely. It's about clarity. Everyone understanding the decision and being willing to support it, even if it wasn't their favorite option.
Nick pushes back a little, saying they don't always have to agree on everything. Catherine agrees, but warns against trying to get consensus just to please everyone, because that often ends up pleasing no one.
The difference Catherine makes between buy-in and consensus is important. While you can't always make everyone happy, you do need to make sure everyone understands why a decision was made and is willing to move forward as a team.
JR then jumps in with the phrase, disagree and commit. And for the first time, the team seems to understand this key principle.
Disagree and commit is a cornerstone of effective teamwork. It means you can debate vigorously, but once a decision is made, everyone supports it, even if they initially disagreed.
Then something interesting happens. Mikey actually shows some interest in hearing about the last dysfunction. And even more unexpectedly, Martin starts hesitantly taking notes, showing that he's starting to get more involved.
These small changes in their behavior suggest that Catherine's message might be getting through, even to the people who were most resistant.
Catherine says they should take a break, but the whole team wants to keep going. JR even jokes that they won't be able to relax until they hear the last dysfunction. So Catherine describes the fourth dysfunction: avoidance of accountability. That means being unwilling to call out colleagues on their bad behavior or hold them to the standards they all agreed on.
Accountability is what makes commitment work. It means that team members have to be brave enough to address problems and performance issues directly and helpfully with each other.
And then another surprise. Mikey identifies the fifth dysfunction: inattention to results. She points out that if everyone isn't committed to the same goals, it's almost impossible to hold each other accountable. Individuals naturally start putting their own needs or their department's needs first.
Mikey identifying the final dysfunction shows that she's starting to understand how these 5 principles are connected. It highlights how a weakness in one area affects all the other areas, ultimately stopping the team from achieving their goals.
So let's quickly review the key insights we've learned today. The 5 dysfunctions of a team are an absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results.
And remember, these aren't separate issues. They work together, like a pyramid. If you don't have trust at the bottom, everything else above it is weakened. Fixing these dysfunctions takes a conscious and consistent effort.
Lencioni also talks about the good things we see in teams that work well together. They trust each other deeply. They have open and productive debates about ideas. They commit to decisions and plans. They hold each other accountable for following through. And they stay focused on achieving results as a team.
These concepts might seem simple, but putting them into practice consistently takes discipline and a real commitment to the team's success, not just individual goals. It's an ongoing process, not a one-time fix.
And that's where we'll pick up next time. We'll look at how Catherine and the Decision Tech team actually work to overcome these dysfunctions. We'll explore the tools and exercises from the book, like the personal histories exercise and the team effectiveness exercise, and we'll talk more about personality profiles. We'll also discuss how important the leader is in building and keeping a team that functions well and performs at a high level.
The real learning comes from understanding how to take these ideas and turn them into actions and real changes in behavior within a team.
So, if you think about what we discussed today, consider your own team or any group you're a part of. Which of these 5 dysfunctions might be present, even in subtle ways?
Yep.
And thinking about what Catherine did, what's one small, maybe even uncomfortable step you could take to start addressing it? Remember, even little actions can make a difference.
That's a great point to keep in mind. Often, the first step to building a stronger team is simply recognizing that these very human dysfunctions exist.
We always talk about the things we can see, like the really clever strategies or the newest technologies that drive success. But what if the real secret sauce, the thing that is both incredibly powerful and really rare, isn't something we can see at all?
I think you're right. You're getting at something really foundational, something that either makes all those other things work better or completely undermines them. It's that invisible structure of how people work together.
Exactly. And in this deep dive, we're going deep into the heart of that. We're looking at the key principles of teamwork, and we're using Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, as our guide.
It's important for our listeners to know that Lencioni uses a really interesting story, a leadership fable, to explain these concepts. So we're going to be pulling out these amazing insights through a narrative that's very easy to relate to.
Basically, think of this as your fast track to understanding what makes a team work well or fall apart. And this applies whether you're leading a team, working on a project with other people, or just dealing with group dynamics in any situation.
The story takes place at Decision Tech. It's a Silicon Valley startup that looked like it would be a sure success. Experienced leaders, a great business plan, and tons of funding.
Yeah, at the beginning, it was all excitement and high hopes. But then things started to go wrong. Missed deadlines became normal, important people started quitting, and the initial energy just disappeared.
And this had a real impact. After only 2 years, the board asked the CEO, Jeff Shanley, to step down. And this was despite the fact that the company still had a good shot at an IPO.
And here's the thing, none of the 150 employees were surprised. That tells you a lot about what the environment was like inside the company. Lots of office politics among the executives, no shared goals, and progress that felt super slow.
This raises a really important question for you to think about. How can a company with so much potential fail like this? The board clearly saw a deep problem, noticing the toxic and unproductive environment. They realized they needed a change in leadership.
Right. And that's when Catherine Peterson steps in as the new CEO. But her background is not what you'd typically expect in Silicon Valley. She had experience in the military, raising kids, and she was involved in competitive sports.
What's fascinating here is how much the board believed in Catherine. The chairman even had a personal connection to her. Her husband had coached his son, so this wasn't just a normal hiring process.